Hi, Teacher Tina here. Today we are talking about how to prepare for your VIPKid classes. I'll be going step by step, telling you exactly what I did when I was a new teacher to get ready for my classes. I know it can be really overwhelming when you're new. I get emails all the time from my new teachers asking me things, saying, I spent so long preparing for my mock class, there's no way I can spend that much time on every class, and psst, you shouldn't have to. Okay? In my mind, most of the work is already done for you, right? With VIPKid. If you think about it, classroom teachers, like brick and mortar teachers, would probably say that most of their prep time goes into creating the content, creating the curricula, and the lessons themselves. VIPKid already did that for you. How nice of them. So basically, all you need to prepare is yourself. You need to make sure that you are ready to teach the classes, you know what's on the slides, you know how you want to engage your student with TPR and props. So that's really how you are preparing, is by preparing yourself. So let's talk about it. In my mind, if a class is 25 minutes long, I don't think you need to spend more than 25 minutes preparing for it. By using my 5 steps that I'm going through today with you, you really shouldn't spend more than 15 to 20 minutes, even if it's a brand new class and a brand new student. This should really cut down the time that you're committing, because remember, you're not paid for the prep time. VIPKid pays you on a per class basis, and they're blocked off in 30 minutes, 25 for teaching, 5 for writing feedback. So you really don't need to be spending a lot of time, and I think you'll discover the more that you teach, like with any skill, the more you do it, the easier it will become. You will not have to spend very long. In my experience, most teachers feel that they spend a lot of time preparing when they're brand new, and then they get used to the flow of the classes, and by the time they've taught maybe 50 or 100 classes, they maybe only spend 5 minutes per class, because they've already got some props made, they're used to using TPR, they've probably taught similar lessons to what they're teaching now, so believe me when I say that it gets better. But let's go through those 5 steps, and if you stick around until the end, I will share a 2-minute trick that I do every day before I start my back-to-back classes that saves me a lot of hassle and headache when I'm jumping from class to class. All right, let's get started. People usually ask me, Tina, when should I start preparing for my classes? And I think that it's great as soon as a class is booked for you to just quickly look over what's in there. All right, just to get a general idea of, maybe what props you can use. I would say don't spend more than about 2 minutes beyond, the 24-hour window of when that class is. And I say that because it's fairly common, especially when you're a new teacher, that parents may cancel a class. And parents can cancel a class, a major course class, outside of 24 hours without having to pay. So it's fairly common when you're brand new for that to happen, and I would hate for you to invest time in preparing for that specific student when that student may disappear from your schedule. But you can always use those props when you get those lessons again. So I don't think getting props ready is a waste of time, but I would wait for everything else until 24 hours before, no further out than 24 hours. So what I usually do is prepare for my classes the evening before. I teach morning classes, so I'll prepare the evening before. So I'm going to go through my 5 steps, and the very first step that I have for you is to find the lesson code, okay? That may not seem like an important step, but let me tell you why it is. So VIPKid has a lot of lessons, okay? And I found that it helped me to see the bigger picture if I thought about where the student was in the VIPKid program. Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's suppose that you have a class and you can preview your classes either in the portal under the Classrooms tab or in the VIPKid Teach app. Let's say that you're preparing for your classes and you see this lesson code. Okay, so we have a major course, let me just say the letters first. MC, L2, U1, LC1, 3. And you're probably thinking, what does that even mean? I hear you. I have created a graphic that I think will help you dissect that a little bit. This is my graphic. If you've watched my videos before, I'm pretty minimalistic with the editing of my videos. I'd rather focus on the content. So anyway, I like to kind of turn the lesson code on its side and think of it as going from really general to really specific. So today we're talking about the major course classes. Trial classes are kind of a thing in and of themselves. Check out my trial class video, investigate the portal under the Academy tab to learn more about trial classes. So today we're focusing on the major course classes. Okay, so major course basically means it's not a trial class or anything funky like summer camp, winter camp. It's just a plain old class. Parents are paying for it. Okay, so it's a major course. L2 means it's a level 2. Now, I've only included levels 2 through 6 on this graphic because level 1 is pre-VIP and it's a little funky and it doesn't really follow this this triangle that I'm showing you. So when you're in, if you get certified for pre-VIP level 1, you'll understand that it's a little different. I'm speaking in general strokes today. So levels 2 through 6. Next we look at the unit. So this unit could be any of 12. So each level has 12 units. So I can tell that the one I'm looking at, wow, this student's only in the first unit. Okay, let's see where in the unit that student is. The next part of this pyramid is the learning cycle. So that's what LC stands for. There are only 2 learning cycles. So basically VIPKid breaks each unit into 2 different learning cycles. So the first learning cycle is lessons 1 through 6. That 6th lesson is a unit assessment. And the second learning cycle is lessons 7 through 12. Okay, so it's really just a unit is broken into 2 learning cycles. Usually the second cycle builds on the first one. So for example, if the first part of the unit, the first learning cycle is about weather, maybe the second one is about seasons. So they're related, but it kind of builds, okay? So we can see that this student is a major course, level 2, so pretty new to VIPKid, unit 1, which is the very first unit, and learning cycle 1, that first half of unit 1, and lesson 3. So it's pretty safe to assume that this student is new to VIPKid. Maybe this student did pre-VIP. I'll be able to see that by looking at the student info, but that student is new to level 2 and probably hasn't had many classes. So that's why I suggest looking over the lesson code so it gives you an idea of what this student's skills will probably be. If it's a low level, early in the unit, your student may need more support. So that's why I suggest for step number 1 is understand the lesson code. Now that's not something that you need to memorize or anything like that, but you can see how there are a lot of different lessons, right? So basically, if each level has 12 units, which has 12 lessons, each level effectively has 144 lessons. So that's why I'm saying you don't need to memorize this information, but just keep it in mind when you're preparing for your classes. Okay, back to our graphic. So the second step that I suggest you do is focus on the objectives. Learn the learning objectives for that particular lesson. Again, you're either in the VIPKid Teach app or you are on the portal under the Classrooms tab. Okay, and what I suggest that you do with the objectives and the sentence patterns is that you write them just on a Post-it note. Okay, just a little sticky note. You write it on there. So for example, I looked at a lesson that I have for tomorrow and I just wrote down, I summarized what the lesson objectives were. So this lesson is about the 5 senses and it focuses on sight and hearing. So that's what I wrote on there. And then I wrote the sentence patterns as well. Now, personally, I think that the process of writing it is more helpful than actually using this sticky note during the class. As science continues to prove, people who write things down are more likely to commit that information to memory. So that's why I suggest that you write down this important information. Things like the objectives and the sentence patterns are kind of the overarching umbrella of the lesson. It's the big picture, what you really need to be focusing on. Okay, it's the meat and potatoes. So I suggest that you write it down, and if you're brand new and you are really unfamiliar with the sentence patterns, be sure that you really are taking the time to remember or at least familiarize yourself with those sentence patterns, because students will continue to use those sentence patterns. So if you teach them and they aren't quite right, your student may get confused with a new teacher trying to teach a different sentence pattern. So what I suggest, if let's say you only have 1 class tomorrow and you're preparing, stick this on your mirror when you're brushing your teeth. stick it somewhere that you will see it. When you're changing your baby, when you're, just so that you can look at it, say it to yourself, teach your cat the sentences. I don't care. Just be sure that you're familiar with those, because that's what's really important with the lesson, is the objectives and the sentence patterns. So focus on those. Okay, so that was step number 2. Step number 3, this is the step that will probably take you the longest. It just says slides and index card. Let me clarify what I mean by that. So you can preview the lesson slides as soon as the class is booked. But as you may remember, I don't suggest getting nitty gritty with it until 24 hours before. Basically what I would do when I was a new teacher is I got pretty colorful index cards. You could totally just use white ones or post-it notes, whatever works for you. And I basically would go slide by slide and get a general idea of what was on each slide. So a typical VIPKid lesson has about 25 slides roughly. The unit assessments in lesson 6 and lesson 12 will be a little longer, but they have a lot of fluff slides. You'll see what I mean when you get your first one. But anyway, I suggest that you go slide by slide. And you may not need to spend more than 15-30 seconds looking at the slide, but you want to be sure that you understand what's happening on the slide and that you read what's at the bottom. Now at the bottom it says tips. It used to be called teacher directions, but I think VIPKid went away from saying that because teachers were sticking to it so much that they weren't adjusting for their students. The tips are merely suggestions, right? So like in the real world, you don't take every tip that somebody gives you. You drive yourself crazy, right? Same thing with these lessons. You don't have to follow the tips exactly. They're more to give you an idea if you need a little help of how to present the slides with your student. So look over the tips, look over the slide, make sure you understand it. And this is your time that you can start thinking about props if you haven't already. Props and TPR, basically the ways that you're engaging your student. And what I would do with those index cards, when I was going through the slides, I would write a very short note to myself, like very short. You can see my chicken scratch or football player handwriting, as my math professor called it. You can see I just gave a very, very short summary of what was on the slide. So for example, let's say it's a level 2 class and the slide has the AT blend, AT, and the letters for the blends are B, N, and P. All I would write is, the slide number. So I'd write 5 at B, N, P. And this was just a note for myself, right? The students never saw these index cards. This was strictly a safety blanket for me. And it helped me to see what was coming up in future slides. So I would actually use these when I was in a real class. I would stick the index card behind my webcam, and then I could glance at it to see what was coming up. Okay? I found that with time, I really didn't end up using these as much, but they were there in case I needed to see what was coming up, because the way that the VIPKid classroom is right now, you can't see what's coming up on future slides. You can see how many slides there are total, which slide you are on of 25, 26, however many there are, but you can't preview what's coming up. So I found this was a helpful tool for me when I was actually teaching, so that I could see what was coming up on the slides, help me with pacing, just being confident. So this was a really helpful tool for me. Again, may not work for you, but it worked for me. And I made these cards for the first 2 months or so that I was teaching. So I didn't just trash these cards after I used them for the morning. I actually stored them. So don't get overwhelmed by this. I'm just showing you because people have found it helpful in the past. I stored all of my little cheat sheets in an index card, and I just stuck a hair holder around it so I could pick it up without driving myself crazy and like million card pickup. But basically I would just file them away after the class. I had little separators for the different levels, and this really helped me to be organized. And then if I had a repeat lesson, I could just grab the card, look through the slides real quick, make sure nothing had changed, which it usually doesn't. And then it was super easy to prep for my classes. Okay, so that is what I would do to figure out how to use those slides. Okay, so like I said, step 3 is the step that's probably going to take you the longest, but it still shouldn't take you more than a handful of minutes, okay? The next thing that I would do was look at the student info. All right, you don't really need to spend a long time looking at the student info because there's not a lot of information in there. But the main information that you'll get on your student is the gender, the birth date, and any comments from you or previous teachers. You may be thinking, why would I need to see gender? Don't they have really obvious names? Sometimes your student will have the name Hamburger or Rainbow, true story, and you won't be sure. So parents select the gender to kind of help you out, and they'll select the birth date. Now, you'll probably notice that at least half of your students have a January 1st birthday in VIPKid system. Do you really think that they're all New Year's babies? No. So usually the birth date isn't quite right, but usually it's within about a year. It gives you an idea of whether you're having a 4 to 5-year-old student or a 10 to 11-year-old student, which makes a big difference in how you might prepare for the class, right? Maybe in the reward system you would use. So be sure that you do look at the student's gender and age. And then also there are the comments in there. So take everything in there with a grain of salt. If you've taught that student before, it may be helpful for you to leave a comment to your future self about what reward system you used, what worked for your student. But remember, teachers aren't required to leave teacher-to-teacher comments in there. It's a courtesy, doesn't have to happen, and you'll never see a comment in there for lesson 6 or lesson 12 because those are unit assessments. So if you see some missing, that might be why, or teachers may have just chosen not to leave comments. Again, they don't have to. But like I said, take those comments with a grain of salt because people are opinionated. Okay, so you might see a comment in there that suggests that the student is really slow with something or distracted or something negative, and it's really not healthy to go into that class thinking, this student sounds terrible, this is going to be a really bad class. Yeah, I definitely got some lipstick on my tooth. Anyway, it's definitely not good to go in with preconceived notions, but what can be helpful is to look and see if any teachers have commented on specific things that the student enjoys, like maybe the student likes Batman or princesses and the teacher put that in there. Maybe the student goes by a name that's different from what is in the system, and a teacher may be alerting you to that. So I definitely would look at it, but don't really base too much on what's in there because students can have good days and bad days. So, okay, so now we've done 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, but what do we do with that student info? So you may be thinking, there are so many students to keep straight. If I'm doing back-to-backs, how do I remember what's up with my student? And I totally hear what you're saying. So going into a day of teaching back-to-back classes, I want you to remember the tools that you've created. So you've written down your objectives, your target sentences, whether you do anything with this after you write it down and commit it to memory is up to you. But you have your little objectives, sticky notes, you have your index card with what's on each slide, right? And then I suggest that you have a notebook. So this is an example. I always do this the night before, like I said. This is an example. This is actually who I have on my lineup for tomorrow. So I basically will just use a notebook. Some teachers like to use an official sheet that they print out. I'm a little simpler than that. But I basically go through, I write the time of the class, the student's name, the code. You'll notice I drop the letters because I know that 4 means it's a level 4, and I know that 2 means, it's unit 2. Like I don't need the letters anymore. So I write the time, name, code, the topic. I'll usually shorten whatever the title of the slides is, and then the reward. So I'll plan out the reward system ahead of time. And then I'll usually write any props that I plan on teaching on there too. So you can see I can easily fit 4 classes on here, and then I use this during my classes. So I have this notebook right next to me when I'm teaching my classes, and this is my little note sheet. So I will usually use a different colored pen when I'm in the classes, and I will just write to myself a very, very quick note, okay? So for example, let's say that my student was mispronouncing the word not. Okay, I don't write a whole note, the student mispronounced the word not. No, that takes too much time and I'm looking down. Instead, I will just write what it sounded like to me to jog my memory. So if the student was saying nout, I will literally write down N-O-W-T. And the whole time I'm looking right at the student, right? I don't need to be looking down. I can write 4 letters without looking. But then this sheet is super easy for me to use to write feedback. Personally, I don't like to feel rushed when I'm writing my feedback. So I basically will, take my notes when I'm doing my back-to-back classes, and then I have a little snack, and then I will go and do my feedback all bam, 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 and I have my notes to help me remember and not mix up my students, right? Okay, so beginning of the day, you've got your tools ready. So you've got your Post-it notes, you've got your individual cards, and you've got your note sheet ready to go. So I do this the night before, then the next morning, I'm not stressing about it. I just pull it all up and I glance over everything, make sure I've got my props within an arm's reach, or, some teachers like to use baskets or something to swap out between classes. But when you're going from class to class, you can literally just be swapping out the index card and moving your pen down a line. Super duper easy, same day. Okay, so just to recap real quick before I share that secret tip for you. So these are the five steps or 5 things that you are looking at. Okay, the lesson code. You're doing the objectives. Okay, you're writing them on a sticky note. You're going slide by slide and making sure you're familiar with what's on them. You're kind of making a game plan. You're writing that on an index card. You're looking at your student info, and then you're creating that daily overview in the notebook or on a sheet if you prefer a sheet. Okay, those are my 5 steps. Like I said, it really shouldn't take more than 15 to 20 minutes for you to do those 5 steps for each of your students, for each class each day. Really shouldn't take you that long. And like I said, it gets easier. Okay. All right, you ready for this top secret tip? All right, it's not top secret. I've actually shared it with several people. But basically, before I teach my back-to-back classes, about half an hour before my first class, I will go in and open up the slides for every single class. Okay? So basically, when I'm on my portal, or using the PC app, Mac app, whatever you're using to access your classes, you go to the Classrooms tab, open each classroom. You can do it from the Bookings tab too. I just prefer to use the Classrooms one. So you'll open each class, and then you go and you open the actual slides. Now that kind of serves a couple purposes. First of all, you already have the slides up there, and so if the parent comes in with the student, they can see, oh, Teacher Tina was already here. Okay, she's definitely going to show up for class. It kind of puts eases the parents and students' minds because they can tell you've left a little trail that you've been there. And it also, bigger bonus in my mind, helps you save time when you're going from class to class. So it does take, maybe 20, 30 seconds to go up and click docs, uploaded by me, click the lesson, get it in there. So by doing it for every single class before you start, it saves you a lot of time. It saves you headache from when you're going to class. I know you get 5 minutes between your classes, but sometimes tech issues happen. Sometimes you need a potty break or something, and it really is a lot easier if you've already got those slides loaded in there. So if you've enjoyed this video, please let me know. Give me a like. I would love to hear any tips that you have for other teachers, maybe something that works for you. So please comment below something that you think is really helpful when you're prepping for classes, or any questions that you have for other teachers. I hope that this video really sparks a conversation. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. I try to create really helpful, to the point videos, and I hope that you have a blast teaching your students. Thank you so much. Happy teaching. Bye.